The darkness of space stretched endlessly in every direction as the human exploration ship Persistence drifted through the silent void. Inside the vessel, Captain Michael Grant stood near the wide observation window, a steaming cup of coffee warming his hands. His eyes traced the distant stars, each one a mystery waiting to be solved. Behind him, the bridge hummed with the quiet efficiency of a well-trained crew going about their routine tasks. It was supposed to be a simple survey mission. Check out an unusual energy signature, collect some data, and move on to the next sector. Nothing complicated. Nothing dangerous. Just another day of pushing humanity's boundaries a little further into the unknown. Lieutenant Amy Ross sat at the tactical station, her fingers dancing across the holographic displays. She'd been monitoring local space for the past hour, watching nothing but empty darkness and the occasional asteroid. It was boring work, but someone had to do it. That's when her screen lit up with contacts. Lots of contacts. "Captain, I'm picking up multiple vessels on approach," Amy called out, her voice cutting through the bridge's quiet atmosphere. "They're coming in fast. Really fast." Michael set down his coffee mug on the nearest console and walked over to her station. His movements were calm, unhurried. "How many are we talking about?" Amy's eyes widened as more contacts appeared on her screen. 23 ships, sir. They're surrounding us. Moving into intercept positions. Classifications?" Michael asked, leaning over to look at the tactical display. "Unknown design. I've never seen anything like them in our databases." Amy tapped a few commands, pulling up visual data. "Heavy armor plating from what I can tell. And Captain, their weapon systems are active. They're hot and tracking us." The main view screen flickered to life, showing the approaching vessels. They were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Sleek and angular, painted in deep shades of crimson and black, each ship looked like it had been designed specifically to intimidate. Weapon ports lined their hulls, and their sheer size made the Persistence look like a child's toy by comparison. "Well, that's new," Navigator Tom Blake commented from his station, his fingers already plotting potential escape routes out of pure habit. Not that running seemed like a good option with 23 warships boxing them in. Science Officer Lisa Morgan was practically bouncing in her seat with excitement. "Captain, this is incredible. First contact with an organized spacefaring civilization. The propulsion signatures alone are fascinating. They're using some kind of exotic matter drive that—" "Maybe save the scientific analysis for later, Lisa," Michael interrupted gently, though a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. Even in potentially dangerous situations, Lisa's enthusiasm was infectious. "Captain, incoming transmission," Communications Officer Jack Miller announced, his hand hovering over the controls. "Audio and visual. Should I put it through?" Michael straightened his uniform and nodded. "Let's see who our new neighbors are. Put it on screen." The view screen shifted, and suddenly they were face to face with something decidedly not human. The alien commander stood at least 7 feet tall, his body covered in thick chitinous armor plates that looked like they could stop a bullet without leaving a scratch. 4 arms extended from his torso, each one ending in clawed hands. His eyes glowed with an eerie light, and when he spoke, his voice rumbled like distant thunder even through the translation software. "Unidentified vessel, you have violated the territorial space of the Cavathian Empire. Power down all systems immediately and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in your immediate destruction. This is your only warning." The bridge crew tensed. This wasn't the friendly first contact scenario they'd hoped for. But Michael's expression remained calm, almost casual. He'd dealt with tense situations before. Granted, those situations had involved other humans, not 7-foot-tall alien warriors, but the principle was the same. Stay calm, stay professional, and try to talk it out. "Hello there," Michael said, his tone friendly and conversational. "I'm Captain Michael Grant of the human exploration vessel Persistence. It seems we've accidentally wandered into your space. That's completely our fault, and we apologize for the intrusion. We were investigating an energy anomaly and didn't realize we'd crossed into claimed territory. We'd be happy to establish proper diplomatic contact and sort this out peacefully." The Cavathian commander stared at him for a long moment. His 4 eyes narrowed, and his mandibles clicked together in what might have been confusion. In his 3,000 years of service to the Empire, species always reacted to his appearance and threats in predictable ways. They either panicked, their biological signs spiking with terror, or they responded with desperate aggression, knowing they were outmatched but fighting anyway. This human was doing neither. He was standing there, relaxed, offering apologies and suggesting they have a conversation like this was some kind of minor traffic incident. "You do not understand your situation, human," the Cavathian commander said, leaning forward toward his own view screen. "You are completely surrounded. Your single vessel is outgunned and outmatched. We could reduce your ship to atoms with a single coordinated strike. You will surrender and submit to our authority, or you will die. There is no third option." Michael nodded thoughtfully as if the alien had just made a reasonable point in a casual debate. "I understand completely. 23 warships, vastly superior firepower, we're in your space without permission. All of that makes perfect sense from your perspective." He paused, then continued with that same friendly tone. "But here's the thing. We really did make an honest mistake. No hostile intentions whatsoever. So how about this? We follow one of your ships to wherever you'd like us to go, we answer your questions, prove we're not a threat, and we work out a proper understanding between our peoples. Maybe over some refreshments? I've always found that difficult conversations go better with something to drink." Behind him, the bridge crew was following their captain's lead. Amy continued monitoring the tactical situation with professional efficiency, though her heart was definitely beating faster than normal. Tom was calmly calculating trajectories and plotting emergency maneuvers just in case. Lisa had returned to scanning the alien vessels, genuinely fascinated by their technology. Jack was preparing to send a compressed data burst back toward Earth, updating command on their situation. None of them were panicking. None of them were begging for mercy. They were just doing their jobs with the calm professionalism of people who'd trained for unexpected situations. The Cavathian commander's mandibles clicked again, louder this time. You are not afraid?" Michael looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "Afraid of what, exactly?" "Look, we clearly made a mistake crossing into your territory. You're taking reasonable security precautions by intercepting us. That all makes sense. So let's just handle this like reasonable beings and figure it out. What do you call yourselves, by the way? I want to make sure I'm using the proper terminology." On the Cavathian flagship, the commander's crew was exchanging confused glances. One of his officers leaned close and whispered urgently, "Commander, their biological readings are strange. Heart rates barely elevated. No significant stress hormones detected in their atmospheric analysis. Either they're incredibly advanced at controlling their fear responses, or they're genuinely not experiencing significant distress." The commander's clawed hands gripped his command throne tightly. Something was very wrong here. In all his centuries of service, in all the Empire's conquests and encounters, prey species showed fear. Predator species showed aggression. This calm, almost casual courtesy was completely outside his frame of reference. Michael picked up his coffee mug again and took another sip, waiting patiently for the alien's response. "Tell you what," he said after a moment, "why don't you give us coordinates to follow? We'll power down weapons systems as a show of good faith. We'll follow wherever you want us to go, and we can sit down and have a proper conversation about all this. Sound good?" The silence stretched on for several seconds. Finally, the Cavathian commander spoke, his voice carrying an edge of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. "You will follow our lead vessel to Processing Station 7. You will maintain a distance of exactly 5,000 meters. Any deviation from the prescribed course, any attempt to charge weapons or engines beyond normal operational capacity, will result in immediate destruction. Is this understood?" "Perfectly understood," Michael confirmed with a slight nod. "We'll be right behind you. And thank you for being willing to talk this out." The transmission cut off abruptly. Michael turned to his crew and allowed himself a small exhale. Well, that could have gone worse. "Tom, follow their lead ship at the specified distance. Amy, power down weapons but keep shields at standard operational levels. Lisa, keep scanning everything you can about their technology but be subtle about it. Jack, send that tight beam message back to Earth. Let command know we've made first contact with what appears to be a significant interstellar power." "Message away, Captain," Jack confirmed. "Should reach Earth in about 6 weeks." As the Persistence fell into formation with the Cavathian fleet, Michael sat down in his command chair and picked up a data pad. "All right, people. Let's review first contact protocols while we travel. We're about to become humanity's first diplomats to an alien empire, so let's make sure we get it right." The crew continued their work with steady professionalism. This was certainly more exciting than a routine survey mission, but they trained for unexpected situations. Humanity had spent the last century preparing for the possibility of contact with other intelligent species. Nobody had expected it to happen quite like this, but then again, nothing ever went exactly according to plan. Aboard the Cavathian flagship, Commander Vex Thor sat in his command throne, staring at the tactical display showing the human vessel obediently following in formation. His crew worked quietly around him, but he could sense their confusion. It matched his own. "Analysis," he commanded. His intelligence officer approached, data pad in hand. "Sir, preliminary scans of their vessel show technology significantly inferior to our own. Their weapons could barely scratch our armor. Their shields would fail within seconds under our firepower. By every measurable metric they should be terrified. And yet they are not," Vexthor said quietly. "No, sir. Their captain treated your threat as if you had asked for directions. One of their crew members is consuming nutrients while running engine diagnostics. Another is actively scanning our vessels with scientific curiosity rather than tactical analysis." Vexthor's claws drummed against the armrest of his throne. In 3,000 years, the Cavathian Empire had conquered 47 species. He knew fear intimately. He knew how prey behaved when cornered. He knew how even fierce warriors showed strain when facing overwhelming odds. But this calm, casual acceptance of a potentially lethal situation? This was something entirely new. Something that made his combat-honed instincts whisper warnings he didn't fully understand. The humans followed peacefully toward the processing station, and somehow that made everything so much worse. Because you can't intimidate someone who doesn't recognize they should be intimidated. And that, Vexthor was beginning to realize, might be the most dangerous thing of all. Processing Station 7 loomed ahead like a monument to intimidation. The structure was massive, built from dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Sharp angles jutted out at aggressive points, and weapon emplacements dotted its surface like the eyes of a predator. Everything about it screamed power and domination. It was designed to make visitors feel small, helpless, and afraid. The Persistence glided into the docking bay, guided by tractor beams that locked onto the hull with mechanical precision. Through the viewports, the crew could see rows of armed Cavathian guards waiting in formation. Each one stood at attention, weapons held ready, their chitinous armor gleaming under the harsh station lights. Captain Michael Grant stood in the airlock with his away team. Lieutenant Amy Ross checked her sidearm one last time before holstering it. Science Officer Lisa Morgan clutched her data pad like a lifeline, her eyes bright with curiosity despite the tense situation. Medical Officer Rebecca Hayes adjusted her medical kit, making sure everything was properly secured. "Remember," Michael said quietly to his team, "we're guests here even if we're not exactly willing guests. Stay professional, stay calm, and follow my lead. We've been through worse." Amy raised an eyebrow. "Have we though, Captain? I mean, hostile aliens with superior firepower is kind of new territory." Michael smiled slightly. "Think of it like that time we got detained by those pirates near the Jupiter colonies. Same basic principle. People with guns asking questions. We talked our way out of that one. We'll talk our way out of this one too." The airlock hissed open and they stepped out onto the station. The temperature was cooler than the ship, and the air had a slightly metallic tang to it. The Cavathian guards immediately surrounded them, weapons pointed but not quite aimed directly at them. A warning and a threat all at once. The lead guard, taller than the others and covered in ceremonial markings, spoke in that rumbling voice the translator struggled to interpret. "You will follow. Do not deviate. Do not touch anything. Do not speak unless commanded to speak." "Understood," Michael said simply, and the group began walking. They were led through corridors that seemed specifically designed to unsettle visitors. The walls were lined with viewing windows, and behind each window was a cell. Inside those cells were members of other alien species. Some huddled in corners, their body language screaming defeat. Others stared out with empty eyes that had long ago given up hope. A few rattled their containment fields desperately, though everyone knew it was futile. The message was crystal clear. This is what happens to those who cross the Cavathian Empire. This is your future if you don't cooperate. Rebecca slowed down slightly as they passed one cell containing what looked like a family unit of some reptilian species. The smaller ones, probably children, clung to the larger adult. Her medical training immediately assessed their condition. Malnourished probably. Definitely stressed. She made a mental note to ask about medical care protocols later. "Fascinating architecture," Lisa commented, looking up at the vaulted ceiling. The support structures formed geometric patterns that were both functional and artistic. The engineering required to maintain structural integrity in a station this size is impressive. Are those support beams made from a titanium alloy or something else? The guard nearest to her stopped walking for a moment, clearly caught off guard by the question. Here was a prisoner, surrounded by evidence of the Empire's power and cruelty, asking about construction materials like she was on a university field trip. Silence, the guard barked, though there was confusion in his tone rather than just authority. Right, sorry, Lisa said, though she didn't sound particularly sorry. She just pulled out her data pad and started taking notes anyway, her fingers flying across the screen as she documented everything she saw. They reached the interrogation chamber after walking for what felt like miles through those unsettling corridors. The room was circular, with walls that seemed to absorb sound, creating a dead acoustic space that felt oppressive. A single light hung from the ceiling, bright enough to illuminate everything but harsh enough to make you squint. In the center of the room were 4 chairs, clearly meant for the humans. They sat down without being told to. Michael crossed one leg over the other, settling in like he was waiting for a delayed appointment. Amy kept her posture straight but relaxed, her military training showing through. Lisa immediately started examining the walls with scientific interest, trying to figure out what material could absorb sound so effectively. Rebecca set her medical kit down beside her chair and folded her hands in her lap patiently. The guards left, and for several minutes nothing happened. It was a classic interrogation technique. Let the subjects sit in uncomfortable silence, let their imaginations run wild, let fear build up. By the time the interrogator arrived, most prisoners were already breaking down. The door opened with a hiss and Interrogator Krell entered the room. He was even more imposing than the guards, standing at least 8 feet tall with 4 arms that ended in claws designed for combat. His exoskeleton was darker than the others, marked with scars that told stories of countless battles. His 4 eyes could focus on each human simultaneously, a predatory feature that had broken stronger beings than these soft, fragile creatures. Michael looked up and smiled. "Hello. I'm Michael. This is Amy, Lisa, and Rebecca. It's nice to meet you." Krell stopped in his tracks. In his 40 years as an interrogator, no prisoner had ever greeted him like he was a colleague arriving at a meeting. He rumbled forward, his massive frame designed to tower over subjects, to make them feel small and vulnerable. "I am not here for pleasantries," Krell's voice filled the room like rolling thunder. "I am here to determine what threat your species poses to the Cavathian Empire. You will answer my questions fully and truthfully. Deception will be detected and punished." "That sounds fair," Michael said with a nod. "We're happy to answer your questions. We've got nothing to hide. What would you like to know?" Krell's eyes narrowed. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. "Where is your homeworld?" "We call it Earth. It's the 3rd planet from our sun in what we call the solar system." Michael leaned forward slightly, his tone conversational. "If you need the exact coordinates, I can provide them. We're located in the Orion arm of the Milky Way galaxy, about 2/3 of the way out from the galactic center." Krell felt something close to confusion, though he'd never admit it. Species never volunteered the location of their homeworld. That information was usually extracted through hours of pressure and threats. "How many vessels does your species possess?" "In deep space? Currently about 17 exploration ships like the Persistence. We've got more ships operating within our solar system, but those are mostly short-range vessels. Mining ships, transport shuttles, research stations, that sort of thing. Our deep space fleet is still pretty small. We've only been traveling beyond our solar system for about 30 years now." Again, immediate answers. No hesitation. No fear. Krell moved to his next question, his voice dropping lower, more menacing. "What are your weapons capabilities?" "Well, that depends on which ship you're asking about," Michael said thoughtfully. "The Persistence is an exploration vessel, so we're not heavily armed. We've got point defense systems for dealing with asteroids and space debris. Some kinetic weapons for emergency situations. Basic shield generators. Nothing particularly impressive compared to what we've seen from your ships. Your technology is definitely more advanced than ours in terms of firepower." Krell leaned forward, placing all 4 hands on the table with enough force to make a quiet thud. "You claim to be peaceful explorers, yet you show no fear when confronted by superior force. You are either foolish or you are hiding your true nature. Which is it?" Lisa raised her hand slightly like a student in class. "Can I answer that one?" Krell's multiple eyes focused on her. "Speak. We're not hiding anything really. It's just that humans have dealt with stressful situations for most of our history. This is definitely tense, don't get me wrong. But compared to some of the things we've been through as a species, this is manageable." She shrugged. "We've had situations where our own people threatened each other with weapons that could destroy our entire planet. We've had diseases that killed millions before we figured out how to stop them. We've had our own planet try to kill us with storms and earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. So being interrogated by aliens, while definitely unusual, isn't exactly the scariest thing we've experienced. No offense. Krell straightened up, processing this information. You speak of catastrophes casually. Because they kind of are casual for us, Rebecca added, her medical training giving her insight into trauma responses. Every generation of humans grows up knowing that something terrible could happen at any moment. War, disease, natural disaster, economic collapse. We prepare for it. We train for it. We build systems to survive it. And when it happens, we deal with it and move forward. That's just how humanity works. Yeah, Amy agreed quietly. My grandmother lived through the climate wars. My parents survived the pandemic of 2034. I grew up doing disaster drills in school every month. Fire drills, earthquake drills, active shooter drills, contamination drills. You prepare for the worst and hope for the best. It's just normal for us. For the next 3 hours, Krell threw every psychological technique in his considerable arsenal at these 4 humans. He showed them footage of the Cavathian military in action. Fleets of warships reducing planets to rubble. Armies overwhelming defenses with overwhelming force. Cities burning under orbital bombardment. The usual images that made prisoners realize the futility of resistance. The humans watched with the focused attention of students watching a historical documentary. Lisa actually took notes. Michael asked a technical question about orbital bombardment patterns. Amy observed the tactical formations with professional interest. Krell described in graphic detail what happened to species that resisted the Empire. The torture methods. The slow destruction of their civilizations. The breaking of their will. His voice carried the weight of absolute certainty that resistance was futile. Michael listened carefully and asked clarifying questions about their prisoner treatment protocols. Rebecca inquired about medical care for detainees. Lisa wanted to know more about their methods of cultural integration. He had guards fire weapons near their heads, the energy blasts close enough to feel the heat, close enough to make their hair stand on end. It was meant to break their composure, to make them flinch, to show them how close they were to death. Lisa flinched the first time, jerking slightly in her seat. Then she blinked, collected herself, and asked about the energy signature of the weapon and whether it was plasma-based or something else entirely. Finally, after 3 hours of getting nowhere, Krell slammed all 4 fists down on the table simultaneously. The impact was loud enough to echo despite the sound-dampening walls. His 4 eyes blazed with frustration. Why do you not break? Michael looked at him with genuine confusion. Break? We're just having a conversation. You're asking questions about humanity and we're answering them honestly. Why would we break? Because you are at our mercy. Krell roared, his voice filling every corner of the room. Because we could execute you at any moment. Because your entire species stands on the edge of extinction if we decide you are a threat. Because you should be terrified. Rebecca leaned forward, her medical training kicking in. Her voice was gentle, genuinely concerned. Are you okay? You seem really stressed. Would you like to take a break? Maybe get some water or whatever your species drinks. Interrogations are probably exhausting work. The room went completely silent. In the observation room behind the one-way mirrors, Cavathian officers stared at their monitors in disbelief. Heart rate monitors showed the humans were calm. Stress hormone analysis from atmospheric sampling showed minimal elevation. One of them had asked if the interrogator needed a break. This was impossible. This violated everything they understood about psychology, about fear, about power dynamics. Krell left the chamber without another word, his footsteps heavy with confusion and something that might have been concern. Commander Vexthor stood in the observation deck, his 4 arms crossed behind his back as he stared through the reinforced viewport at the holding area below. The 4 humans were still down there, talking among themselves like they were waiting for a delayed flight rather than being imprisoned by a hostile alien empire. One of them, the medical officer, was examining the structural integrity of the wall panels with what appeared to be genuine scientific curiosity. This was unacceptable. 3 hours of interrogation had yielded nothing but polite answers and concerned questions about his interrogator's stress levels. Psychological warfare had failed completely. These humans were either the greatest actors in the galaxy, or something about them was fundamentally different from every other species the Empire had encountered. Subcommander Threx approached from behind, his footsteps deliberate. Sir, Interrogator Krell's report is quite unusual. He recommends immediate escalation to physical testing. He believes psychological methods are completely ineffective against this species. I read his report, Vexthor replied, his voice carrying the weight of decades of military experience. He said they asked if he needed a break. Yes, sir. The medical officer expressed genuine concern for his well-being. Threx paused. Sir, what are your orders? Vexthor turned away from the viewport, his mind already formulating a plan. Prepare the crisis simulation. Scenario 7. The impossible choice. Threx's mandibles clicked nervously. Sir, that scenario is designed to break even the strongest-willed species. It forces them to reveal their true nature by making them choose between self-preservation and altruism. Every species chooses themselves in the end. Exactly. And I want to see what these humans choose. Vexthor moved toward the control station. Set it up in Sector 7. Actual civilians, but keep them informed this is a drill. I want the humans to believe it's real. We need to see how they respond when lives are genuinely at stake. Within minutes, the simulation was ready. Sector 7 of the station, a residential area housing Cavathian workers and their families, would experience a simulated reactor malfunction. The human ship would be in position to either escape to safety or attempt a rescue. But the timing would be impossible. They could save themselves or they could try to save the civilians. Not both. Down in the holding area, the humans had been moved to a larger room with communication access to their ship. It was presented as a gesture of good faith, but really it was to facilitate the test. Michael was reviewing data on his handheld device when the alarm started blaring. The lights shifted to emergency red. Warning klaxons echoed through the corridors. The universal signs of disaster in any space station, human or alien. Michael was on his feet instantly, his device forgotten. What's happening? The communication panel on the wall crackled to life. Vexthor's voice, deliberately urgent, filled the room. Attention human prisoners. There has been a critical malfunction in Sector 7 of this station. Reactor containment is failing. 300 Cavathian civilians, including family units, are in immediate danger of radiation exposure and explosive decompression. Your vessel is the closest ship capable of evacuation. You have 4 minutes before cascade failure results in total loss of that sector. Amy was already at the communication panel, her fingers flying across the controls to contact the persistence. Tom, do you copy? We need immediate status report. Tom Blake's voice came back from the ship, steady despite the obvious tension. Copy, Lieutenant. I'm reading the emergency on station sensors. That sector is about to go critical. They're not kidding about the 4-minute window. Michael moved next to Amy. Can we reach them in time? Calculating now, Tom replied. They could hear his fingers working the navigation console through the open channel. Maximum thrust, direct approach, emergency docking procedures. We're looking at 4 minutes and 15 seconds minimum. Captain, that's cutting it really close. How close? Michael asked, his voice calm but focused. We succeed or we all die close, Tom said honestly. If that reactor goes while we're docking or during evacuation, we're in the blast radius. The persistence won't survive. Lisa was already pulling up station schematics on her data pad, her scientific mind working through the problem. If we use the cargo holds and compress the passenger areas, we can fit 300 people. It won't be comfortable, but it's possible. Life support will be strained but manageable for short-duration transport. Rebecca was gathering her medical kit, her training automatically preparing for mass casualty situations. I'll need to prep the medical bay for potential radiation exposure cases. We'll need to do rapid triage as they board. Anyone showing severe exposure gets priority treatment. In the observation deck, Vexthor watched their reaction with intense focus. They're actually considering it. Impossible, Threx breathed. The timing makes it nearly suicidal. They should be calculating escape vectors right now. But the humans weren't calculating escape vectors. Michael was already issuing orders. Tom, plot a course to Sector 7, maximum thrust. I don't care if you stress the engines. Get us there. Jack, coordinate with Cavathian emergency services. We'll need civilian routing to the docking points. Lisa, I need you working on radiation shielding solutions with whatever we have available. Rebecca, triage protocols. Everyone who can help with loading civilians reports to the airlocks immediately. A chorus of yes, Captain responses came back through the communication system. Amy looked at Michael, her expression serious. Captain, you understand the risk here? If this goes wrong, we don't make it out. Michael met her gaze steadily. 300 people, Amy. Including children. We're not leaving them to die if there's any chance we can get them out. Just checking, sir. I'm with you. Amy turned back to the communication panel. Tom, what's our status? Breaking away from docking clamps now, Tom reported. Through the communication channel, They could hear the strain in the ship's engines as the Persistence pulled away from its berth faster than safety protocols recommended. Course plotted. This is going to be rough, people. Hold on to something. The observation deck's displays showed the human ship accelerating towards Sector 7 at velocities that made the Cavathian pilots monitoring the situation wince. The approach vector was aggressive, the speed dangerous, the entire maneuver reckless by any standard operational procedure. But it was working. 3 minutes 30 seconds, Threx announced, his voice tight. In Sector 7, actual Cavathian civilians who had been briefed that this was a drill were now watching in confusion as a human ship approached at combat speeds. The warning alarms were real enough, even if the danger was simulated. Some of them were starting to wonder if maybe this wasn't a drill after all. The Persistence executed a docking maneuver that would have failed any flight school examination. Too fast, too aggressive, too many variables that could go catastrophically wrong. But Tom Blake had been flying ships since he was 16 years old, including 5 years running blockades during the Jupiter colony disputes. He'd done dangerous docking procedures before. Just never with alien lives depending on it. The docking clamps engaged with a shutter that ran through both vessels. Docked, Tom announced, opening all airlocks and cargo bay doors. All hands, prepare for emergency embarkation. 2 minutes 45 seconds, came the announcement over the station-wide system. Michael, Amy, Rebecca, and Lisa had run from their holding area towards Sector 7 the moment the ship docked. Cavathian guards had tried to stop them initially, but Vexthor had ordered them to stand down. He wanted to see what the humans would do. What they did was take charge of the evacuation like they'd been born for it. Michael was at the main airlock, manually overriding safety protocols to get the doors open faster. Everyone this way. Quickly please, but don't panic. We have room for everyone. Children and elderly first, but we're getting everyone out. Cavathian civilians, confused but following their survival instincts, began rushing toward the human ship. Amy was at the entrance, counting people as they boarded, keeping track of numbers, maintaining order in what could have easily become chaos. Keep moving. All the way to the back. Use every available space. We've got you. Rebecca had set up a rapid screening station right at the airlock. She was scanning each person as they passed, looking for signs of radiation exposure or injury, marking the most serious cases for immediate attention. Sir, you're showing elevated exposure levels. Go straight to the medical bay, someone will direct you. Ma'am, you're good, keep moving to the cargo hold. Lisa was in the Persistence's engineering section, frantically rerouting power systems. Her fingers flew across the controls as she pulled power from every non-essential system, bleeding auxiliary power to the shields, reinforcing the hull sections facing the reactor. Captain, I'm giving us about 30 seconds of protection from the initial radiation burst, but we need to be gone the moment that 30 seconds is up. Understood, Michael acknowledged while still guiding civilians aboard. How many more, Amy? 62 still coming through. Amy shouted back, her voice competing with the alarm klaxons. 2 minutes, Tom's voice was still steady despite the pressure. Everyone, we are now officially in the danger zone. That reactor goes, we go with it. In the observation deck, Vexthor leaned forward, his claws gripping the railing. They're actually going to try to get everyone. A Cavathian officer at the monitoring station looked up from his displays. Sir, their stress levels have elevated, but they're still functioning with remarkable efficiency. They're treating this like a train drill. Their movements are coordinated, practiced. 1 minute 30 seconds. The station-wide warning blared. Rebecca caught an elderly Cavathian civilian who stumbled coming through the airlock. The individual was clearly struggling with the pace, their legs unsteady. Without hesitation, Rebecca put an arm around them, supporting their weight. Easy, I've got you. Just a few more steps. You're almost safe. The elderly Cavathian looked up at this strange alien creature helping them, confusion and gratitude mixing in their expression. What? Why do you risk yourselves for us? Rebecca smiled, even as sweat dripped down her face from the exertion and stress. Because you need help. That's enough reason. Come on, let's get you secured. 1 minute. Last group coming through now. Amy called out. She was manually counting, her eyes tracking every person who passed through the airlock. 47, 48, 49. Michael grabbed the last civilian, a young Cavathian child who had been separated in the rush, and lifted them through the airlock. That's everyone. Tom, we're clear. Go, go, go. 45 seconds. Disengaging docking clamps. The Persistence pulled away from Sector 7 with barely controlled violence. The engines screamed with strain, pushed far beyond their recommended operational limits. But they responded because human engineering had learned long ago to build things that worked even when everything was going wrong. 30 seconds. Lisa watched her jury-rigged shields holding. Shield integrity at 70%. 65. Come on, hold together. 20 seconds. Tom's hands were steady on the controls, his eyes fixed on his displays, calculating vectors and velocities in real time. Passing minimum safe distance in 3, 2, 1. We're clear. 10 seconds. Everyone on the Persistence held their breath. 300 Cavathian civilians packed into spaces never designed for that many people. The reactor vented right on schedule. A massive plume of superheated plasma erupted from Sector 7 in a controlled burn that lit up space like a miniature star. From the observation deck of the station, it looked absolutely catastrophic. Exactly as designed for the simulation. But the Persistence was already far enough away that the blast wave merely rattled the ship instead of destroying it. Inside the human vessel, 300 Cavathian civilians were packed into every available space. Cargo holds that normally carried supplies now held frightened families. Corridors were lined with people sitting wherever they could find room. The medical bay was filled with those Rebecca had flagged for radiation screening. It was cramped, uncomfortable, and the life support systems were working overtime. But everyone was alive. Tom Blake let out a long breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. All clear. No casualties. We're out of the danger zone. His hands were still steady on the controls, though his shirt was soaked with sweat. Life support is strained but functional. We can maintain current capacity for about 6 hours before we need to offload passengers. Michael made his way through the packed corridors, checking on the civilians. Many of them were still in shock, processing what had just happened. A few were crying, some were comforting others, and several were staring at the human crew members with expressions that mixed confusion with something that might have been gratitude. One young Cavathian child, no more than 6 or 7 in human years, tugged on Michael's sleeve. The child's parent tried to stop them, but Michael knelt down to be at eye level. "Thank you," the child said in halting English, clearly having access to translator. "You saved us." Michael smiled gently. "You're welcome. That's what people do, right? Help each other when things get scary." He reached out and ruffled what might have been the child's version of hair, though it felt more like smooth chitin. "You're safe now. We'll get you back to your home soon." On the observation deck, Commander Vex Thor stood in absolute silence. Subcommander Threx was beside him, equally speechless. Every officer in the command center was staring at their displays, trying to process what they had just witnessed. "Run the analysis," Vex Thor finally said, his voice quiet. A technician pulled up the data streams. "Sir, their heart rates were elevated throughout the operation, but remained within functional parameters. Stress hormones were present but controlled. Their coordination was flawless. It's like they've done this exact scenario hundreds of times." "Have they?" Vex Thor asked. The technician pulled up more data from the human ship's computer systems, information they'd been passively collecting since the Persistence arrived. "Sir, their training protocols include something called emergency preparedness drills. They practice scenarios like this constantly. Hull breaches, reactor failures, mass casualty events, hostile boarding actions. They drill for multiple simultaneous catastrophic failures on a regular basis." Threx moved closer to the displays. "Every species trains for emergencies. That's standard military and civilian preparedness." "Not like this, sir," the technician continued, pulling up more files. "Look at this. They have an entire educational system built around disaster response. Their children practice evacuations starting at age 5. They learn first aid. They study survival techniques. They're taught to remain calm during crisis situations as part of their basic education." Another officer spoke up from a different station. "Sir, I've been analyzing their communication patterns during the rescue. They used specific terminology that suggests standardized emergency procedures. Terms like triage protocols, emergency embarkation, rapid decompression response. This wasn't improvised. They have established systems for dealing with catastrophes." Vex Thor's mind was racing. He'd commanded military operations for over 60 years. He'd seen species fight with courage, others flee in terror, and many break under pressure. But this was different. These humans hadn't risen to meet an extraordinary challenge. They'd simply performed at what appeared to be their normal operational level. "I want full access to their historical databases," Vex Thor commanded. "Everything. I want to know what made them this way." Deep in the intelligence division of the station, Analysis Officer Drathik had been working for hours, sifting through humanity's historical records. The humans had willingly provided access to their databases, holding nothing back. They seemed to have nothing to hide. As Drathik dug deeper into human history, he began to understand why. What he found made his 4 hands tremble. He immediately contacted Vex Thor. "Commander, you need to see this. Right now." Minutes later, Vex Thor, Threx, and Interrogator Krell entered the analysis chamber. The room was dark except for the glow of multiple holographic displays, each one showing different aspects of human history. Drathik looked like he hadn't slept, his eyes wide with something between awe and horror. "Report," Vex Thor ordered. Drathik gestured to the first display with a shaking hand. "Sir, I've completed a comprehensive analysis of human history and their homeworld. I don't even know where to begin. Their planet, this Earth, is beautiful from space. But sir, it's a death trap." The display showed Earth rotating slowly, blue and green and white, looking peaceful and inviting. "That doesn't look dangerous," Krell observed. "Watch," Drathik said, and the display changed. Footage began rolling across multiple screens. Massive hurricanes tearing apart coastal cities. Earthquakes reducing buildings to rubble in seconds. Volcanoes erupting with enough force to darken their skies. Tsunamis drowning entire regions. Tornadoes carving paths of destruction through populated areas. Wildfires consuming forests and towns. Blizzards burying communities under meters of snow. Droughts turning fertile land into desert. Floods overwhelming river valleys. "Their planet tries to kill them," Drathik explained, his voice carrying disbelief. "Regularly. These aren't rare events. Hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, extreme weather. It happens constantly. They've built their entire civilization knowing that nature could destroy it at any moment." Vex Thor leaned closer to the displays. "Natural disasters occur on many worlds. Not like this, sir. Not with this frequency and intensity. Their planet is geologically active, meteorologically unstable, and prone to extreme environmental events." Drathik pulled up another set of data. "But that's just the natural disasters. Now watch what they do to each other." The display shifted to show human conflicts. Ancient battles with primitive weapons. Medieval wars with thousands dying in single engagements. Industrial age warfare with mechanized destruction. Then the truly horrifying footage began. Trench warfare where millions died fighting over small strips of land. Entire cities reduced to ash by aerial bombardment. And then the mushroom clouds. Massive explosions that could be seen from space, weapons that could split atoms and release enough energy to erase cities in an instant. "They developed weapons capable of destroying their own planet," Drathik continued. "These nuclear weapons, they call them. At their peak, they had enough of these weapons to render their entire world uninhabitable. Thousands of them, pointed at each other, ready to launch at a moment's notice." Krell's mandibles clicked in shock. "They would have destroyed themselves. They almost did. Many times." Drathik pulled up more historical data. After they invented these weapons, they spent 40 years in what they called the Cold War. 2 major power blocks, each capable of destroying the other, each knowing that if they launched their weapons the retaliation would kill everyone. For 40 years, their entire species lived under the constant threat of total extinction. Every day they woke up knowing that this could be the day someone pushed the button and ended their world. Threx stared at the data in disbelief. That level of sustained existential dread should have broken them psychologically. No species can maintain stability while living under imminent threat of extinction for that long. "They did more than maintain stability," Drathik said, pulling up more files. "They built bunkers. They created survival protocols. They taught their children what to do in case of nuclear war. They practiced air raid drills. They stockpiled supplies. They made plans for how to rebuild civilization after the bombs fell." He paused, letting that sink in. "They normalized living under the threat of extinction. They made it part of their everyday life." The displays continued showing human history. World wars that killed tens of millions. Regional conflicts that raged for decades. Terrorist attacks. Industrial disasters. Transportation catastrophes that killed thousands in single incidents. "But it's not just war," Drathik continued. "Look at this. 25 years ago, a disease pandemic swept across their planet. A virus that killed millions. They had to lock down their entire civilization. They stopped global travel. They shut down their economies. They wore protective equipment for years. Entire cities went silent. And you know what they did? They adapted. They developed vaccines. They created new protocols. They restructured their society to survive it. And after 3 years, they reopened their world and continued forward. Another display showed more recent events. Climate change forcing mass migrations. Resource shortages leading to conflicts. Economic collapses that wiped out the savings of billions. Each crisis met with the same pattern: immediate response, systematic adaptation, eventual recovery, and then preparation for the next disaster. Every generation of humans grows up with catastrophe, Drathic explained. It's not an exception for them. It's the rule. They expect disaster. They prepare for it. They've systematized their response to the end of the world. Vexthor moved from display to display, absorbing the weight of human history. Centuries of warfare. Millennia of natural disasters. Decades of living under nuclear threat. Years of pandemic lockdowns. And through it all, humanity persisted. Not just survived but grew stronger, more numerous, more technologically advanced. Show me their military engagements, Vexthor commanded, his tactical mind needing to understand how they fought. Drathic pulled up combat footage from human conflicts across their history. Soldiers moving through urban warfare zones with bullets flying past them. Medical personnel treating wounded while explosions detonated nearby. Commanders making life-or-death decisions while their positions were under direct attack. Rescue teams pulling survivors from collapsed buildings while aftershocks threatened to bring down more structures. What struck Vexthor wasn't their ferocity or their weaponry. It was their composure. Human soldiers under fire moved with practiced efficiency. There was fear in their eyes sometimes, yes, but they functioned through it. They didn't freeze. They didn't panic. They did their jobs while chaos erupted around them. They don't lose control in battle, Vexthor observed quietly. Even when facing death, they remain functional. Because battle is just another form of disaster for them, Drathic explained. War, disease, natural catastrophe. To humans, these are all just different types of problems to solve. The emotional response is the same. Fear exists, but it doesn't paralyze them. They've learned to function through fear because they've had no choice. Threx pulled up a specific data file that had caught his attention. Sir, look at this. Human philosophy. They have an entire school of thought called existentialism that arose from contemplating the meaninglessness of existence in the face of inevitable death and suffering. They philosophize about extinction? Krell asked. They built entire branches of philosophy, art, and literature around it, Threx continued, scrolling through the data. And their conclusion wasn't to give up. Their conclusion was that meaning and purpose must be created despite the absence of inherent meaning. They literally turned nihilism into a reason to keep going. They weaponized the concept of meaninglessness into motivation. Another officer spoke up from a different station. Sir, I'm seeing something interesting in their entertainment and media. They have entire genres dedicated to survival scenarios. Stories about apocalypses, disasters, end-of-the-world situations. They consume this content recreationally. They find entertainment in scenarios of human extinction. What kind of species finds entertainment in its own potential extinction? Krell asked, his voice carrying genuine confusion. One that's already lived through it multiple times, Drathic answered quietly. They've been so close to extinction so many times that they've developed a cultural fascination with it. It's like they're trying to prepare themselves mentally for the next disaster by imagining every possible scenario. The Grand Council chamber of the Cavathian Empire was unlike anything humans had ever seen. The room was a perfect sphere, with council members seated at different gravitational orientations around the curved walls, creating the impression that everyone was simultaneously above and below each other. It was designed to represent the Empire's dominion over all directions of space, a constant reminder that the Cavathians controlled everything around them. Today, every single seat was occupied. Word had spread throughout the Empire about the humans. The species that didn't panic. The species that rescued 300 civilians while their own lives hung by a thread. The species that treated the mighty Cavathian Empire like a minor inconvenience rather than an existential threat. Commander Vexthor stood on the central platform, the traditional place for those presenting matters of critical importance to the Empire. Beside him stood Captain Michael Grant, looking remarkably calm considering he was standing before the leaders of an empire that had conquered 47 different species. Michael's hands were clasped behind his back, his posture relaxed but respectful, his eyes taking in the impressive architecture with genuine interest. Emperor Cavrex sat on the highest throne, positioned at what humans would consider the top of the sphere. He was ancient, his chitin darkened with age, his 4 eyes carrying the weight of centuries of rule. Those eyes now focused intently on the human standing below. Commander Vexthor, The Emperor's voice resonated through the chamber, amplified by the spherical acoustics. You have brought a representative of this new species before the full council. This is highly irregular. Explain yourself. Vexthor bowed in the traditional manner, all four arms crossing over his chest. Your Majesty, honored council members, I present Captain Michael Grant of the human exploration vessel Persistence. After extensive examination and testing, I recommend immediate establishment of formal diplomatic relations and a comprehensive treaty of mutual respect. A ripple of shocked whispers moved through the council chamber. Councillor Drethmore, one of the oldest and most traditional members, leaned forward in his seat. You recommend a treaty? Commander, we are the Cavathian Empire. We have conquered 47 species across 3,000 years. We do not negotiate with those who violate our borders. We conquer them or we destroy them. These are the only two options that have maintained our dominance. Under normal circumstances, I would agree completely, Counselor, Vexthor replied, his voice steady and professional. But these circumstances are far from normal. One small exploration ship with inferior technology hardly seems unusual, another council member interjected. What makes this situation different? The ship isn't what concerns me, Vexthor said carefully. It's what the species represents. What they've survived. What they're capable of. Emperor Cavrex raised one hand, and the chamber fell silent immediately. Speak plainly, Commander. You are a decorated military officer with 6 decades of service. You do not recommend treaties lightly. What have you discovered that warrants this unprecedented action? Vexthor activated the holographic display system in the center of the platform. Earth appeared, rotating slowly in 3-dimensional detail. Humanity originates from what we would classify as a Class 12 death world. Their planet experiences regular catastrophic environmental events. More significantly, they have survived multiple extinction-level threats of their own making. Large-scale wars that killed millions. Weapons capable of sterilizing their entire planet. Global environmental collapse. Disease pandemics that spread across their entire population. And yet, not only did they survive, they continue to thrive and advance technologically at a remarkable rate. Many species have histories of internal conflict, Councillor Drethmore dismissed with a wave of his hand. This is not unique. With respect, Councillor, it absolutely is unique, Vexthor replied, pulling up the compiled historical data. We attempted our standard intimidation and interrogation protocols. They were completely ineffective. Not because the humans were resistant or defiant, but because they genuinely did not understand why we expected them to be frightened. Ineffective. The Emperor's tone sharpened with interest. Elaborate. They were polite, Your Majesty. Cooperative. They answered every question honestly and completely. When we showed them footage of our military might, they watched with academic interest and asked technical questions. When we described what happens to species that resist the Empire, they took notes. When we subjected them to psychological pressure techniques that have broken hardened warriors, they asked if our interrogator needed to take a break because he seemed stressed. A few uncertain clicks and murmurs rippled through the council chamber. Vexthor continued, pulling up footage of the rescue operation. We designed a test scenario. An impossible choice between self-preservation and altruism. We gave them 4 minutes to either save themselves or attempt to rescue 300 of our civilians from a reactor failure. The timing was calculated to make rescue effectively suicidal. Every species we've ever tested has chosen to save themselves. The holographic display showed the Persistence executing its dangerous approach, the frantic evacuation, the narrow escape. Council members leaned forward, watching intently. They didn't hesitate, Vexthor said quietly. They immediately chose to attempt the rescue. They executed a flawless evacuation under extreme time pressure, treated it as a routine emergency drill, and successfully saved every single civilian. One of their crew members was humming while she rerouted power systems with less than a minute before potential reactor breach. The chamber fell silent. Michael cleared his throat gently. If I may, Your Majesty? Every eye in the chamber turned to him. A prisoner, or guest, or whatever he was, speaking directly to the Emperor without being specifically invited to do so was unprecedented. But Vexthor nodded his permission, and the Emperor gestured for Michael to continue. Thank you. I want to say that we're not trying to be disrespectful or dismissive of your Empire's power, Michael began, his tone conversational but sincere. We understand you're incredibly advanced, militarily superior, and have 3,000 years of successful conquest behind you. That's genuinely impressive. But from our perspective, the situation we found ourselves in, while definitely tense, wasn't unprecedented. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Humanity has been through a lot. Wars where millions died. Weapons that could destroy our world, aimed and ready to fire for decades. Diseases that killed indiscriminately. Natural disasters that struck without warning. For most of human history, we've lived with the knowledge that catastrophe could happen at any moment. When your ships surrounded us, it was concerning, absolutely. But we've had our own weapons pointed at each other for generations. When you interrogated us, we've had our own governments do worse to their own people. When you tested us with that rescue scenario, we trained for situations like that constantly. Michael's expression was earnest, almost apologetic. I'm not saying your empire isn't powerful or dangerous. I'm saying that from our frame of reference, dealing with external threats is actually easier than dealing with the threats we've created for ourselves. You can negotiate with an empire. You can establish diplomatic relations. You can find common ground. You can't negotiate with a hurricane or a pandemic or nuclear weapons that could launch due to a miscommunication. Those things don't care about diplomacy. So in some ways, yes, this situation has been stressful, but it's also been refreshingly straightforward. Counselor Drethmore bristled visibly. You dare to suggest that the Cavathian Empire, with 3 millennia of dominance, is less threatening than your primitive internal conflicts? Not less threatening, Counselor, Michael corrected respectfully. Just more manageable. With you we can talk. We can explain ourselves. We can reach understanding. That's actually a huge improvement over most of the threats we're used to dealing with. The council chamber erupted in whispered conversations. Some members looked offended. Others looked confused. A few looked genuinely thoughtful. Emperor Cavrex raised his hand again for silence. Commander Vexthor, you mentioned they've systematized their response to catastrophe. Explain this further. Your Majesty, humans don't just survive disasters, they've built their entire civilization around expecting them. Vexthor pulled up more data. Their children begin emergency preparedness training at age 5. Evacuation drills, first aid, survival techniques. All standard educational curriculum. Their adults maintain emergency supplies as a matter of routine. Their governments have entire departments dedicated to disaster response and recovery. They've created standardized protocols for every conceivable catastrophe. They don't hope disasters won't happen. They assume disasters will happen and prepare accordingly. Another holographic display showed human schools running various emergency drills. Children calmly filing out of buildings during fire drills. Students taking cover during earthquake simulations. Teachers coordinating lockdown procedures. They train their young to survive, an older council member observed. They train their young that survival requires constant vigilance, preparation, and the ability to remain calm under pressure, Vexthor clarified. Every human grows up knowing that something terrible will eventually happen. The only questions are when, how bad, and how to survive it. This isn't pessimism for them. It's realism based on thousands of years of experience. Threx, who had been standing quietly nearby, added his own analysis. Your Majesty, I've reviewed their advancement timeline. They went from basic steam engines to nuclear power in less than 2 centuries. From the first powered flight to landing on their own moon in 66 years. From room-sized computers to artificial intelligence in 50 years. They advance rapidly because every disaster teaches them something new, and they never stop learning. Emperor Cavrex sat back in his throne, processing everything he was hearing. Around the chamber, council members whispered among themselves, debating, questioning, trying to understand what this meant for the Empire. Finally, the Emperor spoke again. Human. Captain Grant. What does your species want from us? Michael straightened slightly, appreciating the direct question. Honestly, Your Majesty, we'd like to apologize formally for the territorial violation. It was genuinely accidental. We weren't trying to intrude or cause problems. Beyond that, we'd like to establish diplomatic relations if you're willing. Maybe work out some trade agreements. We're very interested in learning about your technology and culture. And we'd like permission to continue our exploration of this region of space, with proper respect for your borders now that we know where they are. And if we refuse? The Emperor asked, his tone probing rather than threatening. If we declare your species enemies of the Empire? Michael considered the question thoughtfully. Then we'd leave your space and mark it as restricted in our navigation databases. We'd inform other human vessels about your borders and your preference that we stay away. We'd rather not be enemies, obviously. We'd much prefer to be friends or at least friendly neighbors. But if you decide that's not possible, we'll respect your decision and maintain our distance. You would not seek revenge for your imprisonment? For the threats made against you? Revenge for what, Your Majesty? Michael looked genuinely confused by the question. You found unknown vessels in your territory and took reasonable security precautions. You tested us to determine if we were a threat. Once you determined we weren't, you're treating us with respect and bringing us before your leadership for proper diplomatic discussion. That's actually pretty reasonable from our perspective. Honestly, you should see how humans treat each other when territorial disputes happen. This has been remarkably civilized by comparison. A few council members actually made sounds that might have been the Cavathian equivalent of surprised laughter. Vextor pulled up one final set of data. Your Majesty, I've studied their historical patterns extensively. Humans have a documented history of fighting wars with other human nations and then becoming close allies afterward. They fought two massive global wars against each other in the 20th century, conflicts that killed tens of millions. And within decades of those wars ending, former enemies became trading partners and military allies. They don't see conflict as permanent. They see it as a problem to solve and then move past. Emperor Kavrex stood, and immediately every council member rose with him in a show of respect. The ancient ruler looked down at the humans standing calmly on the platform below, this representative of a species that had survived things that should have destroyed them multiple times over. Captain Michael Grant of Earth, the Emperor's voice carried formal weight. The Cavathian Empire recognizes humanity as a sovereign species with full diplomatic standing. We grant your vessels safe passage through designated trade routes in our space. We establish formal diplomatic relations between our peoples. And we offer a treaty of non-aggression and mutual trade, to be negotiated in detail by our respective diplomatic corps. Michael bowed respectfully, the gesture a bit awkward since humans didn't have 4 arms to cross over their chests, but the intent was clear. On behalf of humanity and the United Earth Government, we accept your recognition with gratitude, Your Majesty. We look forward to a long, peaceful and mutually beneficial relationship between our peoples.